In September 2015, a man finished his shift and was never seen again. Years later, Facebook assisted with a breakthrough. Ricardas Puisys was born on March 9, 1980 in the town of Salantai, Lithuania. Growing up in his home country, he eventually made the decision to leave in search of new opportunities abroad. His journey led him to Wisbech, a small market town in Cambridge, United Kingdom, where he hoped to build a more secure life for himself. Upon arriving in the UK, Ricardas found work as a casual land worker. Most of his employment came through agencies which placed him in different agricultural roles across the region. In 2015, he was working at the Nightlier Leak Company based in Chatteris. The job was demanding but steady, and it offered him a way to support himself while living far away from his homeland. Life in Wisbech was modest for Ricardas. He lived in shared multi-occupancy housing. Without a car, he relied on others or public transport to get around. Ricardas kept to himself much of the time. He had few friends and spoke only limited English, which made it difficult to form close connections outside of his immediate circle. Unlike many, he had no family nearby, and this sense of isolation meant his ties to the local Lithuanian community became especially important. It was there that he found some familiarity and comfort in a foreign land. Concerns about Ricardas' well-being began to surface when he failed to turn up for a scheduled shift just 2 days after he was last seen. Colleagues quickly grew worried as Ricardas had always been reliable with his work. The sense of unease deepened when his identification badge was discarded in a local park, raising questions about what might have happened to him. The last confirmed sighting of Ricardas was on September 26, 2015 at the Nightlier Leak Company in Chatteris, the very place where he had been employed. That evening, he appeared to vanish without explanation. Shortly after, a local resident went to the police to report the troubling situation, setting in motion a chain of events that would soon escalate into something far more serious. By November 2015, the Cambridge police launched a full-scale investigation. The decision came after the detectives developed the belief that Ricardas might have been a victim of modern slavery. What troubled the investigators most was that no body had been found, yet the circumstances strongly suggested that Ricardas had come to harm. Witnesses began coming forward claiming that Ricardas was seen in the company of a small group of Lithuanian men on the night he disappeared. These accounts painted a concerning picture of his final hours, suggesting that he had not simply walked away from his life, but had instead been taken into a dangerous situation. The detectives treated these statements seriously as they pieced together the fragments of Ricardas' last known movements. The investigation quickly grew in scale, with the officers following up on numerous leads. Teams worked tirelessly interviewing potential witnesses, retracing Ricardas' steps, and searching for any clue that might explain his disappearance. In December 2015, a man in his 30s was arrested in connection with the case. The development briefly raised hopes that the investigation might be nearing a breakthrough. However, after questioning, the suspect was released without further action, leaving the police once again at a standstill, and the case went cold. In late 2019, 4 years later, the case of Ricardas took an unexpected turn when the police discovered a Facebook account operating under his name. The page contained photographs that appeared to be of him, raising the possibility that he might still be alive. Despite this promising lead, the investigators were unable to confirm the authenticity of the images or establish whether Ricardas was actively behind the account. As word of the Facebook activity spread, reports began to surface of potential sightings of Ricardas in both Wisbech and nearby King's Lynn. Each account was treated with caution, as previous leads had often led to dead ends. Still, the prospect that he might be alive reignited hope among those who had long believed his disappearance concealed more than met the eye. Remarkably, nearly 5 years after he had last been seen, Ricardas was finally found alive. On July 1, 2020, the police discovered him hiding in dense undergrowth in a woodland area near Wisbech, less than 2 miles from where he had lived. The revelation stunned both the investigators and the community. Ricardas had been living in a makeshift camp, deliberately hidden from view and avoiding human contact. His survival depended on staying unnoticed, and he succeeded in remaining undetected for years. The choice to live this way appeared to be tied to his past experiences, as the police later confirmed that he had previously been a victim of crime and was intentionally concealing himself. The hidden camp was located in deep undergrowth off a residential street, yet it remained out of sight from passersby. The authorities described the site as very well concealed, so much so that it could easily have been overlooked during the years of searching. The ingenuity of its construction explained how Ricardas managed to stay out of reach for so long, even while living so close to the town where he had disappeared. After locating Ricardas in the woodland, the police immediately brought him into the station. This was done not only to verify his well-being, but also to provide him with a safe environment after years of isolation. The officers recognized the vulnerability of his situation and ensured he was placed under protection while further steps were taken. In the days that followed, the authorities arranged for Ricardas to move into a safe house in another part of the country. This relocation was crucial as the investigators launched a modern slavery case connected to his ordeal. By removing him from the area, they aimed to shield him from further harm and allow him to rebuild his life without fear of payback. The detective chief inspector handling the case revealed that Ricardas had been forced into a form of modern slavery by an individual with links to organized crime. This connection shed new light on why his disappearance had seemed so troubling from the beginning. It became clear that Ricardas had been exploited and controlled in ways that prevented him from living freely. After he was found, Ricardas began to share parts of his story. He described being violently assaulted on 2 occasions after his arrival in the UK for work. One attack involved a set of keys being used as a weapon, while another saw him beaten with a barbecue. These violent acts left him living in constant fear, shaping the decision he would later make to retreat from society altogether. The abuse did not stop at physical violence. Ricardas explained how the man controlling him had taken his passport and bank card, effectively stripping him of his independence. Even his wages at the farm where he worked were taken away, leaving him trapped in a cycle of exploitation with no obvious way out. According to the DCI, Ricardas' decision to live in hiding was driven by these experiences. Fearing for his life, he kept himself a prisoner in the woods for nearly 5 years, believing it was the only way to stay safe. His remarkable survival was not just an act of endurance, but also a reflection of the extreme lengths he felt he had to go to in order to escape the grip of his abuser. In October 1980, the body of a 29-year-old man was discovered in Yavapai County, Arizona. Nearly 40 years later, DNA testing on cigarette butts identified the criminals. Michael E. Lee was born in 1951. By the age of 29, he had established himself as an iron worker. Though he lived in Indiana, Michael often traveled to Arizona. On October 21, 1980, the body of Michael was discovered off Highway 179 near milepost 300. The location, an unincorporated area of Yavapai County just outside Prescott, became the grim backdrop of his final moments. The quiet stretch of road often used by travelers passing through Arizona now carried the weight of a shocking crime. The discovery marked the abrupt end of Michael's life at just 29 years old. The police authorities were immediately dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, they secured the area and quickly confirmed that Michael was dead. The circumstances of his death pointed to violence rather than accident, and the investigators were forced to confront the reality that a crime had taken place. The presence of law enforcement and the investigators transformed the desolate roadside into an active crime scene. An autopsy was conducted to determine the cause of death. The medical examination revealed that Michael had suffered multiple gunshot wounds to the head, leaving no doubt that his life had been ended. The brutality of the act raised questions about who could have targeted him and why. For the investigators, the findings solidified the direction of the case. They were now searching for a criminal. Following these revelations, the police began their investigation. They combed through what evidence was available, hoping to reconstruct the final hours of his life. The investigators sought to uncover where Michael had been, who he may have encountered, and what circumstances led to his violent end. Each question pointed to an urgent need for answers. Despite these efforts, the investigation soon faced challenges. Information was scarce and leads proved difficult to develop. Witnesses were few, and the isolated location provided little in the way of immediate clues. As time passed, the case grew colder. Without new leads or breakthroughs, Michael's case slipped into the growing list of unresolved crimes. In June 2018, nearly 4 decades after the case was opened, a new development brought fresh attention to the case. a volunteer working with the sheriff's cold case unit submitted cigarette butts collected from the original crime scene for DNA testing. The decision marked a turning point, as modern forensic methods offered possibilities that had not existed in 1980. When the results came back, they revealed a critical light. The DNA extracted from the cigarettes matched that of David Ellsworth Widmer. At the time of the crime, Widmer had been 31 years old. This discovery connected him directly to the scene and reignited the investigation. In the months that followed, the detectives began piecing together more information about Widmer and his possible connection to Michael. Their investigation revealed that Widmer had not acted alone. Along with an accomplice named Rocky Crabtree, Widmer had targeted Michael with the intent to rob him. This detail reshaped the understanding of the crime, showing that Michael's death had been the result of a violent plan carried out by two convicted felons. The detectives came to believe that both Widmer and Crabtree bore responsibility. The evidence suggested that the robbery attempt escalated into a fatal attack, leaving Michael with multiple gunshot wounds to the head. The men's criminal pasts aligned with the violent nature of the crime, reinforcing the investigators' conclusion that the pair were behind the crime. By the time these connections were established, however, both suspects were no longer alive. Crabtree had passed away in 1990, and Widmer passed away in 2019. Their deaths closed the door on the possibility of prosecution, leaving justice unattainable in the legal sense. For the investigators, this reality was frustrating, as it meant the answers came too late to hold anyone accountable in court. Still, the investigation pressed forward. Even without the chance to see the suspects face trial, law enforcement remained committed to completing the case. As the investigation developed further, the detectives established that Michael personally knew both Crabtree and Widmer. The connection among the three men helped explain how Crabtree and Widmer were able to approach Michael without raising suspicion before carrying out their plan. In July 2020, the motive, the investigators concluded, was robbery. Information had reached Crabtree and Widmer, suggesting that Michael carried a significant amount of cash with him. According to what they were told, he supposedly kept the money tied in a bandana around his leg. This detail became central to the fatal decision made by the two suspects who sought to profit from what they believed would be an easy target. When Michael was found, the investigators noted that the bandana had been cut from his leg. Forensic analysis later confirmed that Widmer's DNA was present on the fabric, further cementing his link to the crime. Yet their plan revealed a fatal miscalculation. Despite their violent actions, Crabtree and Widmer failed to search Michael's wallet. His wallet, which remained in the pocket of his pants, contained more than $1,000 in cash. The oversight underscored the flawed nature of their crime, revealing that the robbery not only cost Michael his life, but also ended with the suspects missing the very money they had intended to steal. What they did appear to take, however, was a small amount of marijuana that Michael had in his possession. Based on interviews conducted during the investigation, the detectives noted that the marijuana was described as ditch or skunk weed, a low-quality substance of little real value. In the end, the criminals had taken nothing of significance, leaving behind both the cash and any meaningful gain from their crime. With the findings in hand, the investigators reached out to Michael's family to share the conclusions of the case. While Crabtree and Widmer had long since passed away and could not be prosecuted, the detectives were firm in their belief that both men would have been charged with taking the life of Michael if they were still alive. The case, though unresolved in court, was brought to a form of closure. For Michael's family, the answers offered a measure of peace, even as the detectives acknowledged that true justice in the legal sense would never come. One morning in January 1996 in Australia, an 18-year-old woman vanished. Over the next year, two more young women also vanished from the same area under eerily similar circumstances. The case remained unsolved for decades until DNA evidence identified the criminal. On January 27, 1996, Australia Day, 18-year-old Sarah Spiers and her friends were dropped off at Club Bayview in Claremont just after midnight by her sister. The night was meant to be a celebration filled with laughter and music, but events soon took a troubling turn. Sarah enjoyed the evening with her friends before eventually leaving the club on her own. Shortly after, around 2:06 a.m., Sarah called for a taxi from a public phone booth. She was seen waiting at the corner of Sterling Road and Sterling Highway, a familiar intersection in the area. When the taxi arrived just 3 minutes later at 9 a.m., Sarah was nowhere to be found. Her sudden disappearance immediately raised concerns among those who had been with her. When Sarah failed to return home, her sister grew increasingly worried. Recognizing the seriousness of the situation, she filed a missing persons report with the local authorities. The report marked the beginning of a search and investigation into Sarah's disappearance, but the uncertainty surrounding her whereabouts left her family and friends in distress. Not long after Sarah's disappearance, on June 9, 1996, 23-year-old Jane Rimmer and her friends began their night at Ocean Beach Hotel, later heading to the Continental Hotel. Initially, they considered continuing the night at Club Bayview, but ultimately decided against it due to the long queues outside. Noting the crowd, Jane's friends opted to catch a taxi home, while Jane chose to stay behind, planning to enjoy the night further. Jane's decision to remain out late became a cause for concern when she failed to return home. Her parents, Jenny and Trevor Rimmer, had regular contact with her, and her unexpected absence immediately raised alarm. Recognizing that something was wrong, they quickly alerted the police, initiating a search and investigation into her disappearance. Jane's body was found 55 days after her disappearance on August 3, 1996, by a woman picking wildflowers in bushland at Wellard, about 40 to 45 kilometers south of Perth. Jane was discovered naked with defensive wounds, particularly on her wrist, and her throat had been slashed. A forensic pathologist noted that there was no conclusive evidence of inappropriate assault, although it could not be entirely ruled out. On March 15, 1997, 27-year-old Ciara Glennon was celebrating with friends at the Continental Hotel in Claremont. Around midnight, she began walking home alone along Sterling Highway and was last seen interacting with a driver in a light-colored vehicle near a bus stop at approximately 12:30 a.m. when Ciara did not return home. Her parents filed a missing persons report, beginning a frantic search for their daughter, and adding her to the growing list of young women who had vanished under mysterious circumstances in the area. Within 48 hours of Sarah's disappearance, the case was escalated and taken over by the Major Crime Squad. Recognizing the potential severity of the situation, the authorities moved quickly to coordinate resources and begin a thorough investigation. The initial urgency reflected the growing concern over the young woman's sudden and unexplained disappearance. After Jane went missing, the Western Australia Police responded by establishing a special task force called Macro. Its purpose was to investigate the two cases which bore striking similarities. Both young women had vanished in Claremont under suspicious circumstances, prompting the authorities to consider a possible connection and intensify investigative efforts. Following Ciara's disappearance, the police publicly confirmed that they were investigating the work of a potential serial offender. The case gained further attention when the Western Australian government offered a reward of $250,000 for information, the largest ever offered in the state at that time. This announcement highlighted the seriousness of the situation and the urgent need for public assistance. Early inquiries focused on unidentified vehicles seen near two of the locations where the women had been last spotted, as well as a mysterious man captured on video footage. Suspicion also turned toward Perth's taxi drivers, since the women were last seen in situations where they might have used taxis. This included a driver who claimed to have transported Sarah the night before her disappearance, placing him under scrutiny as the investigation progressed. Nearly 3 weeks later, on April 3, 1997, Ciara's body was discovered by a bushwalker near Piccadilly Road, Eglinton, approximately 40 to 55 kilometers north of Claremont. She was semi-clad, and the evidence suggested that she had tried to defend herself during the attack. The discovery marked a chilling development in the case, confirming that her disappearance had ended in tragedy. The authorities continued their search for Sarah's body, leaving her family and the community in ongoing fear and uncertainty. Despite the efforts of the detectives, the case eventually went cold. In 2008, more than a decade later, a breakthrough in the Claremont case came when DNA found under Ciara's fingernails was matched to a 1995 Karrakatta cemetery assault. This critical evidence provided the first tangible link to a known criminal act, guiding the authorities closer to a potential suspect. Over time, the investigators continued to analyze DNA profiles and compare them against the Western Australia DNA database. Eventually, a match emerged that connected the evidence from Ciara's case to a specific individual. On December 22, 2016, another 8 years later, Bradley Robert Edwards was arrested at his home in Cuddill in connection with the deaths of both Jane and Ciara. The following day, he was formally charged, facing accusations not only for these cases, but also for multiple prior offenses. These included the 1988 break-in and assault of an 18-year-old woman, as well as the 1995 assault of a 17-year-old girl, underscoring a long history of violent behavior. As a 21-year-old in 1990, he had grabbed and tried to force a dishcloth into the mouth of a 40-year-old social worker while working as a telecom technician at Hollywood Hospital. A court-ordered psychological report at the time said that Edwards had been in distress that week after his de facto wife confessed to cheating on him. This victim, Wendy Davis, wrote a book about her story titled "Don't Make a Fuss. It's Only the Claremont Serial Killer." Her incident was not taken seriously. If taken seriously, could have prevented the other crimes from taking place. She said, "I want people to understand there can be real consequences if women are not listened to when they speak up about violence." In October 2019, Edwards pleaded guilty to the non-murder charges. This admission set the stage for a high-profile judge-alone trial that lasted 7 months and involved testimony from over 200 witnesses. The proceedings were exhaustive, covering decades of evidence and numerous incidents, all of which painted a clear picture of Edwards' criminal pattern. On September 24, 2020, the trial concluded with Edwards being found guilty of ending the lives of Jane and Ciara. The judgment cited key evidence, including the DNA recovered from Ciara's fingernails, matching fibers from Edwards' Telstra work pants, and a 1996 Holden Commodore he had driven, and his confessions to the 1988 and 1995 assaults. Despite the compelling evidence, Edwards was acquitted of ending the life of Sarah, as the prosecution could not prove beyond reasonable doubt that he was responsible for her disappearance, even though circumstantial evidence suggested a possible link. On December 23, 2020, Edwards was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 40 years. The judge described him as a dangerous predator who specifically targeted vulnerable young women. The police authorities continue to urge Edwards to reveal the location of Sarah's remains, seeking to provide closure to her family and end decades of uncertainty surrounding her disappearance. While the families of the 3 women did not speak outside court, Commissioner Dawson said that they were satisfied that justice had been done.